The most expensive hospital room money can buy. 15 world-class doctors surrounding one bed. Equipment worth millions of dollars. And yet, everyone is paralyzed. A woman is dying. Her baby is dying. And no one, absolutely no one, knows what to do. The monitors scream warnings. Hands that have performed thousands of surgeries now tremble with uncertainty. Voices that command operating rooms with confidence now crack with panic. In the corner stands a billionaire, a man who has never been told no in his entire life, watching helplessly as his wife slips away. Then the door opens. Not with authority. Not with announcement. Just a quiet creak. And in walks a woman nobody notices. A woman in a faded uniform, pushing a cleaning cart, wearing shoes held together with tape. The doctors don't even turn to look at her. Why would they? She's nobody. Just the help. Just another invisible face in the background of their important world. But in the next 15 minutes, this nobody will do something that will haunt every person in that room for the rest of their lives. She will save 2 lives that 15 experts couldn't save. She will expose a truth that will shake a billionaire's empire to its core. And she will prove that sometimes the people we ignore hold the very answers we're desperately searching for. This is not fiction. This story happened. And by the end, you'll question everything you thought you knew about value, wisdom, and who really matters in this world. Before we go any further, I need you to do something. If you want to know how this impossible story unfolds, hit that subscribe button right now. Because stories like this, stories that challenge everything we believe about success and worth, these are what we bring you every single week. And drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. We want to know who's about to take this journey with us. Are you ready? Then let's begin. To understand what happened that night, you need to understand the world Jonathan Harrington built. Jonathan didn't grow up rich. That's important. He grew up in a trailer park in Oklahoma, the son of a mechanic who drank too much and a mother who worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table. By the time he was 12, Jonathan knew 2 things with absolute certainty: poverty was a prison, and money was the only key that mattered. He studied while other kids played. He worked while others slept. He got a scholarship to a state university, then another to business school. And by 30, he had made his first million in tech, buying up patents that nobody else understood the value of. By 40, he had turned that million into 100 million, diversifying into oil, real estate, and emerging markets. By 50, he had reached billionaire status, with a net worth that fluctuated between 2 and 3 billion depending on the market. But money, he discovered, couldn't buy everything. It couldn't buy him the one thing he wanted most, a family. He met Eleanor at a charity gala when he was 36. She was different from the women who usually surrounded him, the ones who calculated his net worth before they learned his name. Eleanor was old money, quiet wealth that didn't need to announce itself. She worked as a curator at an art museum, not because she needed the salary, but because she genuinely loved art. She saw something in Jonathan beyond the bank account, some hunger for meaning beneath all that ambition. They married within a year. The trying began immediately. Eleanor wanted children. Jonathan, honestly, had never thought much about it, but he wanted to give her what she desired. And somewhere along the way, he started wanting it too. Started imagining a son or daughter he could teach, could guide, could give all the opportunities he never had. But month after month, year after year, it didn't happen. They saw specialists. Fertility doctors in New York, London, Switzerland. Eleanor endured procedures that left her bruised and hormonal and crying in hotel bathrooms after each negative test. 3 pregnancies in 5 years. 3 miscarriages. The first at 8 weeks. The second at 12. The third at 16 weeks, far enough along that they had started buying baby clothes, painting a nursery, choosing names. That loss nearly broke them both. Eleanor sank into a depression that lasted nearly a year. Jonathan threw himself into work, acquiring companies with an aggression that made business journals write about his ruthless new phase. But really, he was just running from grief he didn't know how to process. They stopped trying. Accepted that maybe this wasn't meant to be. Talked about adoption, but never quite followed through. And then, impossibly, when Eleanor was 43 and Jonathan was 58, she got pregnant again. Natural conception. No treatments. No interventions. Just, life, somehow finding a way. The doctors called it a geriatric pregnancy, a term Eleanor hated. They warned about risks, complications, the statistical likelihood of problems. But the first trimester passed. Then the second. The baby grew. Strong heartbeat. Normal development. For the first time in 22 years of marriage, Jonathan and Eleanor allowed themselves to hope. Jonathan became obsessive. If money couldn't guarantee happiness, maybe it could guarantee safety. He researched the best obstetrics teams in the world. He flew specialists in for consultations. He paid for experimental monitoring technology. He purchased a private wing of the most advanced hospital in the Northeast, essentially buying an entire floor that would be dedicated solely to Eleanor's delivery. 15 doctors. That was the team he assembled. The head of obstetrics from Johns Hopkins. A high-risk pregnancy specialist from Mayo Clinic. A neonatal surgeon from Boston Children's Hospital. Anesthesiologists, cardiologists, neonatologists, each one the absolute best in their field. 300 combined years of medical experience. Degrees from Harvard, Stanford, Yale, Johns Hopkins, Oxford. Publications in every major medical journal. Hands that had saved thousands of lives. The cost was astronomical. The planning took 6 months. Nothing was left to chance. Or so Jonathan believed. What Jonathan didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that in that same hospital, on the night shift, pushing a cleaning cart through corridors that smelled of disinfectant and desperation, worked a woman who had delivered more babies than all 15 of his doctors combined. Her name was Amma Grace, though most people just called her the night cleaner, if they called her anything at all. Amma was 62 years old. She had come to America 18 years earlier with nothing but a single suitcase and a heart full of hope that had slowly, year by year, been worn down by reality. In her homeland, she had been somebody. A respected midwife. A teacher. A woman that entire villages trusted with their most precious moments. She had learned from her grandmother, who learned from hers, a lineage of knowledge stretching back generations. Knowledge about bodies and birth, about the rhythms of labor, about the ancient dance between mother and child that happens in those final hours before a new life enters the world. She could tell by the sound of a woman's breathing what stage of labor she was in. She could feel the position of a baby through a belly with more accuracy than an ultrasound. She knew which herbs calmed anxiety, which positions eased pain, which words gave courage when a mother's strength was fading. By the time she was 30, she had delivered over 500 babies. Twins. Breech births. Premature babies born 2 months early who weren't supposed to survive but did. She had delivered babies in huts during monsoons, in the backs of trucks racing to hospitals that were too far away, in homes where the only light came from candles and the only assistance came from terrified family members who had never seen birth before. Her success rate was extraordinary. In 15 years of active practice, she had lost only 3 babies, and each of those losses had been due to complications so severe that no intervention, modern or traditional, could have changed the outcome. Then the war came. Civil conflict that tore her country apart. The hospital where she sometimes worked was bombed. Her clinic, built with donations from grateful families, was burned. Her records, her credentials, everything that proved who she was and what she knew, turned to ash. Her husband was killed. Her 2 sons fled to different countries. And Amma, at 44 years old, found herself in a refugee camp with nothing. A cousin in America sponsored her immigration. She arrived in New York with hope, with skills, with knowledge that could save lives. She applied to hospitals to work as a midwife. Every single one rejected her. Her training wasn't recognized. Her experience couldn't be verified. The schools she attended no longer existed. The doctors who could vouch for her were scattered across the world, if they were still alive at all. She took English classes. She studied for equivalency exams. She tried for 3 years to find a way into the medical system. And every door closed in her face. So she took the only job she could get, cleaning. Night shift, because it paid slightly more. Hospitals, because at least she could be near the work she loved, even if she couldn't do it. For 18 years, she mopped floors. She emptied trash bins. She cleaned blood and vomit and the aftermath of tragedies. She watched young doctors make mistakes she could have prevented. She heard mothers crying in languages the nurses didn't understand, and she would quietly enter their rooms during her cleaning rounds and speak to them in their native tongues, offering comfort that the medical staff couldn't provide. She saw babies delivered with unnecessary interventions, with procedures that created complications that a gentler approach would have avoided. And she said nothing. Because who would listen to a cleaner? Who would believe that the woman pushing a squeaky cart through the hallways at 3 a.m. knew more about birth than doctors with decades of training? She stayed invisible. She stayed silent. She survived. Until the night she couldn't stay silent anymore. Eleanor's pregnancy progressed through the 3rd trimester with careful monitoring. Every week brought new ultrasounds, new tests, new data points that the medical team analyzed with intense scrutiny. At 32 weeks, everything looked perfect. At 34 weeks, still good. At 36 weeks, some minor concerns emerged. The baby's position was slightly irregular. Not breech, but not quite optimal either. Probably nothing, the doctors assured them. First babies often don't settle into position until the last minute. We'll watch it closely. But Eleanor felt something was off. She couldn't explain it. Just a mother's intuition, that ancient knowing that predates modern medicine. The baby's movements felt different. More urgent. Sometimes painful in a way that didn't seem normal. She mentioned it to her doctors. They checked everything. Heartbeat, strong. Growth, appropriate. Fluid levels, normal. All your readings are excellent, Mrs. Harrington. What you're feeling is normal 3rd trimester discomfort. Try to relax. But Eleanor couldn't relax. She barely slept those final weeks. She would lie awake at night with her hands on her belly, feeling her daughter shift and turn, and something whispered to her that this birth was not going to be easy. Jonathan saw his wife's anxiety and did what he always did when faced with a problem: he threw more money at it. He brought in additional specialists. He upgraded equipment. He created contingency plans for every possible complication. By the time Eleanor reached 38 weeks, the plan was set. At the first sign of labor, she would come to the hospital. The full team would assemble. They would induce if necessary. They would perform a C-section at the slightest indication of distress. Nothing would be left to chance. The date was set for induction, October 17th, a Wednesday. But babies follow their own timeline. On October 15th, at 9:47 p.m., Eleanor's water broke. She was at home, in their penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park. Jonathan was in his study on a conference call with investors in Singapore. She felt the gush of fluid, felt the first contraction grip her abdomen like a giant fist squeezing from the inside, and she knew immediately that this was it. Jonathan. Her voice cut through his business discussion. He was at her side in seconds, phone abandoned, the billion-dollar deal forgotten. "It's time," she said, and he saw fear in her eyes that he'd never seen before, not even during the miscarriages. The drive to the hospital was a blur. Private ambulance. Police escort. They arrived at 10:23 p.m. The team was already assembling. Doctors arriving from dinner parties, from their homes, from other hospitals. By 11 p.m., everyone was in place. Eleanor was settled in the private suite, monitors attached, for inserted, surrounded by the most advanced medical technology available. The contractions were coming every 5 minutes. Strong but manageable. The baby's heartbeat was steady. Everything, according to every machine and every measurement, was proceeding normally. "This is going to be textbook," Dr. Richard Kaufman, the lead obstetrician, told Jonathan with confidence. "We'll have your daughter in your arms by sunrise." Jonathan wanted to believe him. But he watched Eleanor's face during each contraction and saw something that worried him. She wasn't just experiencing pain. She looked frightened. At 1:30 a.m., Eleanor was 7 centimeters dilated. Progress was good. The medical team was relaxed, confident. Nurses joked quietly. Doctors checked their phones between examinations. This was routine for them. Difficult, yes, but routine. At 2 a.m., something changed. The contractions intensified but became less effective. Eleanor was stuck at 7 centimeters. The baby's heartbeat, while still within normal range, began showing slight decelerations during contractions. "It's okay," the doctors assured them. "This is a normal pattern. Sometimes labor stalls briefly. We'll give it another hour, and if there's no progress, we'll consider interventions." But at 2:15 a.m., Eleanor began to panic. "Something's wrong," she gasped between contractions. "Something's wrong with the baby. Mrs. Harrington, all the monitors show, I don't care what the monitors show." Her voice was raw. "Listen to me. Something is wrong." Dr. Kaufman exchanged glances with his colleagues. A look that said, "Emotional patient, pain and fear causing irrational thinking, stay calm." "Let's do another ultrasound," he said in his most soothing professional voice. They did. What they saw made every person in the room go quiet. The baby had turned. Significantly. She was now in a position that was neither fully breech nor fully head down. Transverse lie, they called it. Oblique position. The baby was essentially diagonal in the uterus, her head caught under Eleanor's right rib cage, her body blocking her own exit. "This is unusual," Dr. Kaufman said slowly, his confident demeanor cracking slightly. Another doctor leaned in to look at the screen. "Can we manually rotate her?" "Not safely, not at this stage of labor with contractions this strong." "External version?" "Too risky. We could cause placental abruption." "Then we go to C-section." "Now." Dr. Kaufman nodded. "Mr. Harrington, we need to perform an emergency cesarean section. Your wife's labor has become complicated," and that's when Eleanor screamed. Not a scream of pain. A scream of terror. "I can't breathe. I can't breathe." The monitors erupted in alarms. Her blood pressure, which had been slightly elevated but stable, suddenly spiked. 180 over 120. Then 190 over 130. Her oxygen saturation began to drop. 98%. 94%. 89%. The baby's heartbeat, steady for hours, began to plummet. 140 beats per minute. 120, 110. 98, the room transformed from calm confidence to controlled chaos in seconds. Code blue. "We need the crash cart. Get anesthesia in here now. Prep for emergency C-section. Her heart rate is too unstable for anesthesia." "Then we don't have a choice, we go without. You want to cut her open while she's conscious? We're losing the baby." The voices overlapped, 15 brilliant minds suddenly paralyzed by a situation that didn't fit any protocol, any textbook, any of their combined 3 centuries of experience. Jonathan stood frozen in the corner, his back against the wall, watching his wife convulse on the bed, watching the numbers on the monitors drop, watching doctors argue about what to do while his wife and daughter died in front of him. This couldn't be happening. He had paid millions. He had hired the best. He had controlled every variable. And yet he was more helpless now than he had ever been in his trailer park childhood, more powerless than when his mother was evicted and he couldn't stop it, more afraid than any moment in his entire life. Dr. Kaufman made a decision. We're going to C-section. Prep her now. We'll use local anesthetic and sedation. It's not ideal, but we're out of options. The team moved into action. Surgical instruments appeared. Lights repositioned. Eleanor was barely conscious now, her eyes rolling back, her breathing shallow. The baby's heartbeat had dropped to 85 beats per minute and was still falling. Dr. Kaufman raised the scalpel. His hand was shaking slightly. He had performed thousands of cesarean sections. Thousands. But something about this moment felt wrong. The angle was wrong. The baby's position made standard incision placement dangerous. If he cut too high, he could hit the baby. Too low, and he might not be able to extract her from her twisted position. He hesitated. Just for a second. But in that second, a monitor flatlined. Eleanor's blood pressure had dropped precipitously. Her heart, stressed beyond its capacity, was failing. She's going into cardiac arrest. Start compressions. A doctor jumped onto the bed and began chest compressions. Another prepared defibrillator paddles. The baby's heartbeat was now 72 beats per minute. Still dropping. Dr. Kaufman looked at his team, looked at the monitors, looked at the impossible situation in front of him, and for the first time in his decorated career, he froze. He didn't know what to do. None of them did. Outside the room, Alma Grace was cleaning the corridor. She heard the alarms from 3 rooms away. Heard the shouting. She knew those sounds. She had heard them before, in villages, in war zones, in moments when modern medicine reached the end of its capabilities. She approached the door. Looked through the small window. Saw the chaos. Saw 15 doctors surrounding one bed. Saw the woman convulsing. Saw the monitors screaming warnings. Saw the panic. And she saw something else. Something the doctors, focused on their machines and their protocols, couldn't see. She saw the baby's position. Saw exactly where the child was stuck. Saw that this was not a catastrophic emergency requiring surgery. This was an ancient problem with an ancient solution. The baby was simply stuck in transition. Her body trying to turn, but unable to complete the rotation because of the mother's positioning and the intensity of contractions. The solution wasn't cutting. It was turning. Helping. Guiding. She'd seen this exact scenario 47 times in her career. And she'd successfully delivered the baby every single time. Her hand went to the door handle. Then stopped. This wasn't her place. These were important people. Famous doctors. She was just a cleaner. Who would listen to her? She started to turn away. Started to push her cart back down the hall and let the experts handle it. Then she heard the woman scream again. A sound of pure terror and desperation. And Alma couldn't walk away. She had taken an oath once, long ago, in a ceremony that meant something even if no American institution recognized it. She had promised to help mothers. To protect babies. To use her knowledge to preserve life. That oath didn't expire just because she pushed a mop instead of attending deliveries. She opened the door. Quietly. The doctors didn't even notice at first. They were too focused on the emergency. Alma stood just inside the room, taking in the scene. Eleanor on the bed, chest compressions being performed. The baby's heartbeat now at 68 beats per minute and falling. Jonathan in the corner, pale as death, tears streaming down his face. Dr. Kaufman with a scalpel in his hand, frozen with indecision. Alma stepped forward. "Stop," she said quietly. No one heard her. "Stop." Louder now. Dr. Kaufman turned, irritated. "What?" "Who let?" Then he saw her uniform. "Security. Get her out of here." A security guard appeared in the doorway, moving toward Alma. But she didn't move. Her eyes were locked on the monitor showing the baby's heartbeat. 65 beats per minute. 62, that baby is not dying, she said with absolute certainty. She is stuck. You are fighting her body. Stop fighting. If you're still watching at this point, drop a comment with, "I'm still here." Let's see who's truly following this shocking story. Because what happens next is going to challenge everything you believe about expertise, about wisdom, and about who really knows what they're doing. Don't go anywhere. This is where everything changes. Dr. Kaufman stared at Alma like she had lost her mind. This woman is in cardiac arrest. Her baby is dying. This is not the time for, she is not in cardiac arrest, Alma interrupted. Her heart is stressed because the baby is pressing on her vena cava. Stop the compressions. Turn her onto her left side. We're not taking medical advice from a cleaning lady, another doctor shouted. But something in Alma's voice, some absolute certainty, made one of the nurses pause. She looked at the monitor. Looked at Eleanor's position, flat on her back. Looked at Alma. Dr. Kaufman, inferior vena cava compression is possible in this position, especially with the baby's unusual placement. It could explain the sudden blood pressure drop. Dr. Kaufman hesitated. Everything in his training told him to ignore this woman and proceed with the emergency protocol. But the nurse was right. Vena cava compression was a known complication. And they were running out of time. Fine, he snapped. Turn her. But if this doesn't work in 30 seconds, we're going to surgery. They rolled Eleanor onto her left side. Within 15 seconds, her blood pressure began to stabilize. 120/85. 115/80. Her color improved slightly. My God, one of the younger doctors whispered. The compression stopped. Eleanor gasped, her eyes fluttering open. But the baby's heartbeat was still dropping. 58 beats per minute now. Still in danger. Still dying. Alma moved closer to the bed. The security guard grabbed her arm. Ma'am, you need to leave, let her go, Jonathan's voice cut through the room. Everyone turned to look at him. The billionaire who had hired them all, who was paying for everything, who had never interfered with medical decisions. Let her go. Let her try. Mr. Harrington, this is insane, my wife is dying. My daughter is dying. And all of you, with all your degrees and your experience and your expensive equipment, you're standing around arguing. So yes, let the cleaning lady try. What the hell do we have to lose? Silence fell over the room. The security guard released Alma's arm. Dr. Kaufman stepped back, his face a mixture of anger and helplessness. If this child dies, it's on you, he said to Jonathan. No, Jonathan replied. If she dies, it's on all of us. But at least we tried something. Alma approached Eleanor. Removed her cleaning gloves. Her hands were rough, calloused from years of hard work. But they were steady. She placed one hand on Eleanor's belly. The other on her lower back. Closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the baby's position. The tension in Eleanor's muscles. The rhythm of what remained of her contractions. This baby is trying to turn, Alma said softly. But she cannot do it alone. And you cannot force her with cutting. We must invite her. Invite her. Dr. Kaufman's voice was thick with sarcasm. What does that even mean? Alma ignored him. She spoke directly to Eleanor, whose eyes had focused on her face. "Do you trust me?" Eleanor looked at this woman, this complete stranger in a cleaning uniform who spoke with such calm certainty while everyone else was panicking. She didn't know why, but something in Alma's eyes, some deep well of experience and compassion, made her nod. "Yes," Eleanor whispered. "Then breathe with me. Long breath in through your nose. Long breath out through your mouth. We make space for your daughter. We invite her to find her way." Eleanor breathed. Alma's hand on her belly moved gently, following the contours of the baby's body through the stretched skin. Her other hand pressed firmly on Eleanor's lower back, at a point that made Eleanor gasp, but not from pain. From relief. Pressure she didn't know she was carrying suddenly released. "She is here," Alma said, her hand moving to Eleanor's right side, just below her ribcage. "Your daughter's head is caught here. Every contraction pushes her harder against this bone. That is why she cannot move. We must make space." She began to hum. Low and rhythmic. A sound that seemed to come from somewhere ancient, somewhere primal. The doctors watched, some with skepticism, some with fascination, all of them unable to look away. Alma's hands moved across Eleanor's belly, not randomly, but with clear purpose. Pressing certain points. Releasing others. Guiding Eleanor into different positions. From her left side to a semi-squat that looked impossible for someone in her condition, but somehow Eleanor managed. The baby's heartbeat stopped dropping. 58, 58. Still dangerously low but stable. Alma positioned Eleanor's legs in a wide stance, her upper body leaning forward, supported by pillows. "This position makes the pelvis wide," Alma explained, though no one had asked. "It gives space for turning. Now we wait for contraction." They waited. The room was silent except for Eleanor's breathing and the steady beep of monitors. Then Eleanor's face contorted. "Contraction," she gasped. "Do not push," Alma commanded. "Do not fight. Let your body open. Let your daughter move." Eleanor nodded, breathless, following instructions from a woman she'd met 3 minutes ago with more trust than she'd shown the doctors she'd known for months. Alma's hands pressed firmly on Eleanor's belly, on her back, guiding, encouraging. The contraction lasted 45 seconds. When it ended, Alma smiled for the first time. She moved. "The head is lower. Again. We need 2, maybe 3 more contractions." Dr. Kaufman checked the ultrasound monitor. His eyes widened. "The baby's position has changed. She's rotating." Another doctor leaned in to confirm. "How is that possible? Without external version?" "Because we are working with the body, not against it," Alma said simply. The second contraction came. Eleanor cried out, not just from pain but from the intensity of sensation as her baby shifted inside her. The third contraction. And then, visible on the monitor, clear as day, the baby completed her rotation. From transverse to oblique to fully head down. Perfect birthing position. The baby's heartbeat began to rise. 62 beats per minute. 70, 85. 105. 128. That's a healthy heartbeat," a nurse said, her voice full of wonder. Eleanor looked up at Alma with tears streaming down her face. "She's okay. Your daughter is ready to be born," Alma said. "Now we let your body do what it knows how to do." What happened over the next 47 minutes would be discussed in hospital corridors for years to come. Alma didn't deliver the baby in any technical sense. She guided Eleanor through labor the way it had been done for millennia, before hospitals, before interventions, before the medicalization of birth. She used positioning. Ancient knowledge of how gravity and posture affect the birth canal. She used breath work. Teaching Eleanor to breathe in patterns that reduced pain and increased oxygen to the baby. She used touch. Her hands constantly assessing, adjusting, encouraging. She used words. Not medical jargon, but simple, powerful affirmations. Your body knows how to do this. Your daughter knows how to do this. You are strong. You are capable. Open and release. Let her come. The doctors stood back. Some because they were ordered to. Others because they were simply too amazed to interfere. They watched as Eleanor, who had been in crisis minutes earlier, progressed through labor with remarkable speed. 8 centimeters. 9 centimeters. Fully dilated. I need to push, Eleanor gasped. Then push, Alma said. Listen to your body. Push when it tells you. Stop when it tells you. No counting to 10. No coached pushing. Just Eleanor, her body, and her baby, working together the way nature designed. Jonathan watched from his position in the corner, forgotten now, irrelevant to this ancient dance happening on the bed. He had never felt more useless or more grateful in his entire life. First push. Eleanor's face turned red with effort. Good, Alma encouraged. Your daughter is strong. She is fighting to be here. Help her. Second push. Third. The baby crowned. Dark hair visible. Dr. Kaufman, unable to help himself, stepped forward to check. Head is crowning. Position is perfect. I can't believe, this shouldn't have been possible. Many things are possible, Alma said, when we stop trying to control and start trying to listen. Fourth push. The baby's head emerged. Fifth push. Shoulders. And then, with a final cry from Eleanor, a final effort that seemed to pull strength from somewhere beyond her physical body, the baby slid into the world. Into Alma's waiting hands. Into the harsh lights of the hospital room. Into the shocked silence of 15 humbled doctors. The baby took her first breath and screamed. A strong, healthy, furious scream that announced she was alive, she was here, and she was not happy about the journey. Alma held her for just a moment, examining her with practiced eyes. Then gently laid her on Eleanor's chest. Your daughter, she said simply. Eleanor's hands came up to cradle the baby, this tiny human she thought she would never hold, this miracle that had almost been lost. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Jonathan crossed the room on shaking legs. Looked down at his daughter. At his wife. At this woman in a cleaning uniform who had just saved both of their lives. I don't understand, he said. How did you, what did you, who are you? Alma smiled. A sad smile. A smile that carried the weight of 18 years of being invisible. I am a midwife, she said simply. Or I was. Before I was a cleaner. She stepped back from the bed, picking up her discarded gloves from the floor. The doctors will take care of you now. You are safe. She turned to leave. Dr. Kaufman's voice stopped her. Wait. Please. I need to understand. That rotation technique. The positioning. I've never seen anything like it. Where did you learn that? Alma paused at the door. Looked back at the room full of expensive equipment, expensive education, expensive egos. I learned it from my grandmother. Who learned it from hers? Who learned it from hers? Going back hundreds of years. This knowledge, it is older than your machines. Older than your medical schools. It is knowledge written in the bodies of women, passed down through generations, earned through experience and observation and listening. But you're a cleaner, another doctor said, not with malice, but with genuine confusion. How does a cleaner know obstetrics better than we do? Because titles do not equal knowledge, Alma said quietly. And diplomas do not guarantee wisdom. I delivered my first baby when I was 19. I have delivered over 700 babies in my life. I have seen every complication you study in textbooks. I have solved them with no equipment, no medication, no backup. Just hands and knowledge and trust in the process of birth. Your machines are wonderful. Your medications save lives. But sometimes the oldest ways are still the best ways. She opened the door. Now I must return to my cleaning. The floor in room 412 needs mopping. And she walked out, pushing her squeaky cart, leaving behind a room full of people whose understanding of the world had just been fundamentally shaken. Eleanor was crying, holding her baby close. Jonathan stood motionless, his mind trying to process what had just happened. The doctors looked at each other, unsure what to say, what to do, how to reconcile what they had just witnessed with everything they thought they knew. A nurse was the first to speak. Should someone go after her? Get her information. She just delivered a baby. There are protocols, legal liability, documentation. Forget the protocols, Jonathan said, his voice rough. Find out everything about that woman. Where she lives. Where she's from. How she ended up cleaning floors when she can do that. He gestured at his wife and daughter, alive, healthy, together. Find her. Because I owe her everything. It took Jonathan's team 3 days to compile Alma's complete story. What they found shocked him more than anything in his business career. Alma Grace Mensah. Born in Ghana, 1964. Raised in a village where she was the youngest of 7 children. Her grandmother was the village midwife, a position of great respect. Alma showed aptitude for the work from an early age. She could calm crying babies. She remembered complex herbal remedies after being told only once. She had gentle hands and a calm presence. By 16, she was assisting her grandmother with deliveries. By 19, after her grandmother died, she became the primary midwife for 6 surrounding villages. She delivered babies in the traditional way, but she also sought to learn modern techniques. At 23, she enrolled in a nursing program in Accra. Worked during the day as a midwife, studied at night. Graduated top of her class. Got accepted to a specialized midwifery training program that was a partnership between a Ghanaian hospital and a European medical charity. For 5 years, she learned both traditional and modern obstetrics. Worked at a teaching hospital. Delivered over 300 babies during her training alone. Published 2 papers on the integration of traditional and modern birthing techniques in developing regions. Was offered a teaching position at the hospital. Then, at 32, she married. A kind man, a teacher named Kwame. They had 2 sons. She continued working, now balancing career and motherhood. She opened a small clinic in a rural area that was underserved. Used her own savings and donations from grateful families to buy equipment, hire staff, create a place where women could receive quality care regardless of their ability to pay. For 8 years, that clinic was her pride. She delivered an average of 75 babies per year there. Her maternal mortality rate was less than 1%, remarkable for a rural clinic with limited resources. She trained younger midwives. She consulted with doctors from the capital who came to study her techniques. She was building something meaningful, something that would outlast her. Then civil war erupted. It started in the north, far from her region, but like all wars, it spread. Rebel groups. Government forces. Militias that answered to no one. The violence reached her area in 1996, when she was 44 years old. Her clinic was in the path of fighting between 2 factions. One night, soldiers came. She never found out which side they were from. It didn't matter. They accused her of treating the enemy. She tried to explain that she treated everyone, that a clinic has no politics, that mothers and babies are not soldiers. They didn't care. They burned the clinic. She watched from the forest where she was hiding, watched 20 years of work turn to smoke and ash. Her records. Her equipment. Her certificates and diplomas and proof of who she was. All of it gone. The soldiers searched for her. She fled with her family. Her husband Kwame was shot during their escape, killed protecting their son so they could run. Alma watched him die. Had no time to grieve. Had to keep moving. Had to save her children. They walked for 3 weeks, hiding during the day, traveling at night. Made it to a refugee camp in a neighboring country. Lived there for 6 months in conditions that stripped away everything except the will to survive. Her sons, 18 and 20 at the time, heard that there were opportunities in Europe. They left, separately, taking different routes. She never saw them again. Letters came for the first few years. One son made it to France. The other to Germany. Then the letters stopped. She didn't know if they were dead or had simply forgotten about the mother they left behind. A cousin in America, a woman Alma had helped deliver 30 years earlier, sponsored her immigration. Alma arrived in New York in 2008, at 54 years old. Spoke minimal English. Had no documents proving her medical background. Had nothing but the clothes she wore and the knowledge in her head and her hands. She tried to work as a midwife. Applied to hospitals, birthing centers, clinics. Every single application was rejected. Her training wasn't from an accredited institution by American standards. Her experience couldn't be verified. She would need to go back to school, get new certifications, essentially start over as if she were 20 years old with no experience at all. At 54, with no money and no English, that was impossible. She took whatever work she could find. Cleaned houses. Worked in restaurant kitchens. Finally got the night cleaning job at the hospital through a staffing agency that didn't ask many questions. She'd been there for 14 years when she delivered baby Grace Eleanor Harrington. 14 years of pushing a cart through halls where she once would have walked as a respected professional. 14 years of being invisible to the very people who were doing the work she had mastered decades ago. Jonathan read this report in his office, 30 floors above Manhattan, surrounded by the trappings of his success. And for the first time in his adult life, he felt ashamed. Ashamed of a system that reduced someone like Alma to cleaning floors. Ashamed that he had walked past her countless times during Eleanor's hospital stays and never seen her. Ashamed that his first instinct, when she tried to help, had been to have security remove her. He picked up his phone and called the hospital administrator. "I need you to find Alma Grace Mensah. The night cleaner. I need her address, her contact information, everything. And I need it today." By evening, he had it. Jonathan went to see Alma himself. Didn't send an assistant. Didn't arrange a formal meeting. Just got the address from his team and drove to the Bronx, to a neighborhood his driver had been nervous about entering even in daylight. Alma lived in a 3-story walk-up, the kind of building where the hallways smelled like old cooking oil and the stairs creaked with every step. Apartment 2C. He knocked. No answer. Knocked again. The door opened a crack, security chains still in place. Alma's face appeared in the gap. Her eyes widened when she recognized him. "Mr. Harrington. Is something wrong? Is your wife okay? The baby? They're perfect. Thanks to you. Can I come in? I need to talk to you." Alma hesitated. Then closed the door to unhook the chain and opened it fully. "I apologize for the mess. I was not expecting visitors." The apartment was tiny. A studio, essentially. One room that served as bedroom, living room, and kitchen. A bathroom so small you could touch both walls with your arms extended. But it was clean, meticulously clean, with touches that showed Alma tried to make it home. A small vase of flowers on the windowsill. Photographs on the wall, faded images of people who must have been her family. A cross hanging above the bed. Alma offered him the only chair. She sat on the edge of the bed. "What can I do for you, Mr. Harrington?" Jonathan looked around the apartment, thinking about his penthouse with its 6 bedrooms and city views. Thinking about what he paid monthly for parking alone, probably more than Alma's annual rent. I came to say thank you. Properly. And to ask why you didn't come back to the hospital. After the delivery. We tried to find you that night, but you had already left. You didn't even stay to fill out paperwork. Alma smiled slightly. Paperwork is not my strength. And I had done what needed to be done. There was no reason to stay. No reason. You saved 2 lives. You did what 15 doctors couldn't do. And you just left. I am a cleaner, Mr. Harrington. I was supposed to be cleaning that night, and I abandoned my cart. I could have been fired. I needed to finish my shift. The simple practicality of it stunned him. She had saved his wife and child, performed a medical miracle, and her concern was finishing mopping floors. Alma, can I call you Alma? She nodded. I've learned about your background. Your training. Your experience. What happened to you? And I want to make you an offer. He pulled out an envelope. Inside was a check. Alma didn't take it. I do not want money, she said quietly. Please, just listen. This check is for $500,000. I know that sounds like a lot, but to me, it's nothing compared to what you gave me. Use it however you want. Go back to school if you need new certifications. Retire comfortably. Send money to your sons if you found them. Whatever you need. Alma looked at the check. Then at Jonathan. And what do you get from this? The knowledge that I've done something decent. Mr. Harrington, you seem like a good man. But I cannot take this money. If I accept money for what I did, it means I did it for payment. I did not. I did it because a mother needed help. Because a baby deserved to be born. That is not something you buy. Jonathan had negotiated billion-dollar deals. Had convinced skeptical investors and hostile board members. Had talked his way into and out of situations that would have destroyed lesser businessmen. But he had no idea how to convince this woman in her tiny apartment to accept help. Then what do you want? Tell me what I can do, because I need to do something. I can't just walk away knowing that you saved my family and you're still cleaning floors. Alma was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, you want to do something? Build a clinic. A clinic? Yes. A place where women who are poor, who don't speak English well, who are afraid of hospitals, can come to have their babies. A place where traditional knowledge and modern medicine work together. Where midwives like I was are respected, where doctors and midwives collaborate instead of competing. Where no woman is turned away because she cannot pay. Where every mother is heard, no matter her language or her status. She leaned forward, her eyes intense. You have power, Mr. Harrington. Money. Influence. Use it to build something that matters. Not for me. For all the women who are dismissed by a system that does not see them. For all the babies who deserve to be born safely. That is what I want. Jonathan stared at her. Then slowly, he put the check back in his pocket and pulled out his phone. Okay. Let's do it. Tell me what this clinic would need. Equipment. Staff. Location. Tell me everything, and I'll make it happen. They talked for 3 hours. Alma described her vision with a clarity that showed she'd been thinking about it for years. Jonathan took notes, made calls, started putting pieces in motion even before he left her apartment. By the time he stood to leave, the foundation of something significant had been laid. At the door, he paused. Will you run it? This clinic? Because I don't want to build something without you at the center of it. Alma shook her head. No. I am too old. Too tired. But I will help you find the right people. And I will teach. I can do that. I can pass on what I know before it is gone. Deal, Jonathan said, and offered his hand. She shook it. A billionaire and a cleaner, partners in something that mattered more than money. The Alma Grace Center for Maternal Wisdom opened 18 months later in a renovated building in Brooklyn. It wasn't in the wealthiest neighborhood. That was intentional. It was placed in a community that needed it, where maternal mortality rates were shamefully high, where immigrant women often gave birth in unsafe conditions because they couldn't afford hospital care or feared deportation. The center was beautiful in a way that honored both tradition and innovation. Modern medical equipment alongside spaces designed for traditional practices. Private birthing rooms that could be configured in different ways depending on what the mother needed. A staff that included obstetricians, midwives, doulas, nurses, and traditional birth attendants from various cultures. Everyone worked together, no hierarchy based on degrees or titles, just mutual respect and shared purpose. Alma didn't run it, but she was there 3 days a week. Teaching. Consulting. Sharing techniques she'd learned over 40 years of practice. Doctors who initially scoffed at learning from a former cleaner found themselves mesmerized by her knowledge. She could diagnose complications by observation that would take them multiple tests to identify. She could calm a panicking mother with a touch and a few words. She knew which positions eased different kinds of pain, which breathing patterns increased oxygen to the baby, which gentle manipulations could correct minor positioning issues before they became emergencies. The center's outcomes were remarkable. In its first year, they delivered 347 babies with 0 maternal deaths and only 2 emergency transfers to hospitals for complications beyond their capacity. Their C-section rate was 15%, well below the national average of 32%. Patient satisfaction surveys showed 98% of mothers would recommend the center to others. Word spread. Women came from across the city. Then from across the state. The model worked. Other cities began asking Jonathan to help them replicate it. Within 3 years, there were 5 Alma Grace centers in different cities. Within 5 years, 12. Each one adapted to its local community but built on the same foundation: respect for traditional knowledge, integration with modern medicine, care without judgment, and accessibility regardless of ability to pay. Jonathan funded it all. Tens of millions of dollars. His business associates thought he'd lost his mind. "You're spending a fortune on charity clinics," one told him over lunch. "What's the return on investment?" Jonathan thought about that moment in the delivery room. About his wife dying. His daughter dying. About 15 experts who couldn't help and one nobody who could. "The ROI," he said quietly, "is that mothers come home with their babies. You can't calculate that in dollars." But the clinics were just the beginning. Jonathan used his influence to push for policy changes. Lobbied for recognition of traditional birth attendants within the medical system. Funded scholarship programs for immigrant healthcare workers trying to get their credentials recognized. Pushed hospitals to integrate midwifery programs and give midwives actual authority, not just support roles. He became an unlikely advocate for maternal health, speaking at conferences, writing op-eds, using his platform to talk about issues that billionaires don't usually concern themselves with. People asked him why. Why this cause? Why this passion? He told them the story. About the birth. About Alma. About learning that the people we ignore often hold the answers we're searching for. Eleanor became involved too. Once she recovered from the birth, once baby Grace was old enough, Eleanor joined the foundation they created. She visited every center. Talked to mothers. Listened to their stories. Used her background in art to help design spaces that felt welcoming rather than clinical. She organized fundraising events where wealthy donors met women whose lives had been saved by the centers. Put faces and stories to the statistics. Made maternal health personal for people who had never thought about it. And Grace, the baby whose complicated birth had started everything, grew up in the centers. Her first memories were of the Brooklyn location, playing in the corner of Alma's teaching room while mothers and medical students listened to lectures. She called Alma grandmother, and Alma, who had lost touch with her own grandchildren, loved her like one. Grace learned early that her life had been a gift. That she existed because people came together across differences. Because someone dismissed and ignored chose to speak up anyway. Because her father, for once in his life, had listened to someone he would normally never hear. 5 years after that night, a documentary crew came to interview Alma for a film about maternal health. They filmed her at the Brooklyn Center, teaching a class to a mixed group of obstetricians, midwives, and nursing students. She was 67 then, her hair completely gray, her body showing the wear of a life lived hard. But her hands were still steady. Her mind still sharp. Her presence still calming. After the class, they interviewed her. Asked her to reflect on what had happened. "Do you think about that night?" the interviewer asked. "The Harrington delivery?" Alma smiled. "I think about every birth I've attended. That one is not special to me because of who the family was. It is special because it reminded me who I was. For 18 years, I cleaned. I was invisible. I had convinced myself that part of my life was over. That I would die having never used my real gifts again. That night, I remembered. I am a midwife. That is who I am, whether I am delivering babies or mopping floors. That identity lives in me, not in a title or a job. But doesn't it make you angry? That you had to clean for so long? That your skills were wasted?" Alma considered this. Angry? Yes, sometimes. The system that ignores people like me, that throws away experience and knowledge because we don't have the right papers, the right accent, the right background, yes, that makes me angry. But anger alone changes nothing. Better to use what happened to me to change things for others. That is what we are doing with these centers. What would you say to other immigrants, other people whose credentials aren't recognized, who feel invisible? Alma looked directly at the camera. I would say, you are not invisible to the people who need you. You may be invisible to the system, to the institutions, to the people in power. But somewhere, someone needs exactly what you have to offer. Hold on to your knowledge. Hold on to your skills. Hold on to who you are. Because the right moment will come. And when it does, you must be ready to step forward, even when everything tells you to stay silent. Especially then. Do you have any regrets? Only one. I wish I had spoken up sooner. How many times did I see doctors making mistakes I could have corrected? How many mothers did I watch suffer when I knew how to help them? I stayed silent because I was afraid. Afraid of being rejected, of being mocked, of losing even the little I had. That night with Mrs. Harrington, I almost stayed silent again. Almost walked away. I regret all the times before when I did walk away. She paused, her eyes distant. There is a Ghanaian proverb, the ruin of a nation begins in the homes of its people. I would change it to say, the healing of a nation begins when we listen to all of its people. Not just the loudest voices. Not just the most credentialed. Not just the wealthiest. All of them. Especially the ones we've been taught to ignore. The interviewer asked about her sons. A shadow passed over Alma's face. I have not seen them in many years. I do not know where they are. If they are alive. I hope they are. I hope they found good lives. I hope they sometimes think of their mother and know that I loved them, that I did everything I could to save them. But I do not expect to see them again in this life. That is a grief I carry. But I also have many children now. She gestured around the center. The mothers who come here. The babies born here. The students I teach. They are my family now. Life takes away, but if you stay open, it also gives back. Just not always in the ways you expected. The documentary aired on PBS. Millions of people saw it. Alma received letters from around the world. From other immigrants who felt seen for the first time. From healthcare workers who were inspired to advocate for change. From mothers who had been dismissed by medical professionals and found validation in her story. She answered every letter personally. Sitting at her small table in her small apartment, because she had never moved despite Jonathan's offers to find her something better. This was her home. She needed nothing more. The experience changed Jonathan in ways that went beyond the maternal health centers. He started actually seeing the people around him. The security guard at his office building. The woman who cleaned his office. The driver who took him to meetings. He learned their names. Asked about their lives. Listened to their answers. His executive team noticed the change. "You're different," his CFO told him. "More. I don't know. Human." Jonathan laughed. "I was always human. I just forgot to act like it." He changed how his companies operated. Instituted living wages for all employees, even contracted workers. Created pathways for advancement that didn't require traditional credentials. Started valuing experience and wisdom alongside degrees and pedigree. When his board questioned these changes, he told them the story. About the night his daughter was born. About the 15 experts who failed and the one uneducated cleaner who succeeded. "We're leaving talent on the table," he told them. "Brilliant people who don't fit our narrow definition of qualified. People with experience and insights we desperately need. If we only hire and listen to people who look like us, who went to the same schools, who have the same backgrounds, we're building an empire on a foundation of ignorance." Some board members loved it. Others thought he'd become soft, lost his edge. 2 resigned. Jonathan replaced them with people who got it. The company thrived. Profits actually increased. Turned out that when you pay people fairly and treat them with respect, they work harder, stay longer, and bring more innovation. Jonathan started speaking about these ideas. At business conferences. On panels. In interviews. He became known not just as a successful billionaire, but as one who actually gave a damn about people. Critics called it performative. Said he was only doing it for good PR after building his fortune on the backs of workers. Maybe there was some truth to that. He'd been ruthless in his earlier years. Had made decisions that maximized profit at the expense of people. He couldn't undo those choices. But he could make different ones going forward. Eleanor watched her husband's transformation with quiet satisfaction. "You're finally the man I hoped you'd become," she told him one night. "What do you mean?" "When I married you, I saw something beneath all that ambition. Some capacity for goodness that was buried under your need to succeed. That night in the delivery room, when you made the choice to listen to Amma, that was the real you emerging. And I'm glad he's here to stay." Grace grew up with unusual values for a child of billionaires. Yes, she had privilege. Private schools. Travel. Opportunities most kids would never have. But she also spent time at the maternal health centers. Saw her parents treat everyone with respect, regardless of their position. Learned early that a person's worth wasn't measured by their bank account or their title. On her 7th birthday, Jonathan asked her what she wanted. "I want to have a party at Grandmother Amma's center," she said. "And I want to invite the moms and the babies." So they did. Threw a birthday party in Brooklyn with cake and balloons and children from every background. Grace played with babies born at the center, shared her gifts with mothers who couldn't afford to buy their own kids presents, and told everyone about how Grandmother Amma had saved her life. Amma watched from the corner, tears in her eyes. This child, who could have been lost. This child, who had given her purpose again. This child, who represented everything good that could happen when people chose to listen, to help, to see each other as human. After the party, Grace came to sit with her. "Grandmother Amma, Daddy says you're a hero." "Your daddy says many things," Amma replied with a smile. "But am I a hero?" Amma considered the question seriously. A hero is someone who does what must be done, even when it is hard, even when it is scary. By that definition, every mother is a hero. Every person who speaks up for someone who cannot speak for themselves. Every person who uses their gifts to help others, even when the world tells them their gifts do not matter. So yes, maybe I am. But so are many, many others. I want to be like you when I grow up, Grace said. Then be kind, Alma told her. Be brave enough to use your voice. Be humble enough to keep learning. Be wise enough to know that the most important knowledge often comes from unexpected places. Do that, and you will be fine. The story of that night spread far beyond the people directly involved. Dr. Richard Kaufman, the lead obstetrician who had been so certain of his expertise, had his own reckoning. He couldn't stop thinking about how wrong he'd been. How close he'd come to losing a patient because he was too arrogant to listen to someone he perceived as beneath him. He wrote a paper about the experience. Published it in a major obstetrics journal. Integrating traditional knowledge in modern obstetric care, a case study in humility. The paper detailed what had happened, examined his own biases, and argued for greater inclusion of traditional birth attendants in medical teams. It was controversial. Some colleagues praised his honesty. Others criticized him for elevating unscientific practices. But it started conversations. Medical schools began inviting traditional birth attendants to speak. Not as curiosities, but as teachers with valuable knowledge. Hospitals started pilot programs integrating midwives more fully into obstetric care. The maternal mortality rate in the United States, one of the worst among developed nations, began to slowly improve in places where these integrated approaches were implemented. Kaufman became an advocate. Spoke at conferences. Trained young doctors. Told the story of the night he was humbled by a cleaner and learned the most important lesson of his career: expertise comes in many forms. Several of the other doctors from that night had similar awakenings. Some joined the Alma Grace Centers as volunteers. Others pushed for changes at their own hospitals. One started a non-profit that helped immigrant healthcare workers navigate the credential recognition process. The nurses who witnessed everything became some of the strongest advocates. They shared the story with every new nurse they trained. Never assume you know everything. Never dismiss someone because of their position. The person pushing the cleaning cart might know more than the person in the white coat. The hospital itself changed its policies. Started actively recruiting staff from diverse backgrounds. Created mentorship programs connecting experienced immigrant workers with pathway programs to transition into clinical roles. Invited traditional healers to consult on complex cases. It wasn't perfect. There was resistance. Old attitudes don't change overnight. But slowly, gradually, the culture shifted. From hierarchy to collaboration. From credentialism to capability. From knowing to learning. Other hospitals noticed. Copied the programs. Within 5 years, dozens of medical centers across the country had similar initiatives. Each one traced its origin back to that night. To a crisis that forced everyone to question their assumptions. To a cleaner who knew more than the doctors. To a billionaire who finally learned to listen. The story reached Ghana. Alma's homeland. A journalist there tracked down people who had known her. Found mothers she had delivered, now grandmothers themselves. Found former students she had trained, some of whom had become prominent doctors and midwives. They shared memories of Alma before the war. Her skill. Her compassion. Her dedication. The journalist published a feature story in Ghana's largest newspaper, The Midwife We Lost, Who Found Her Purpose Again. The article went viral in West Africa. Suddenly, Alma was famous in the country she'd fled. She received calls from cousins she hadn't spoken to in decades. From former colleagues who had thought she was dead. And then, miraculously, a call from her son. The younger one, the one who had gone to Germany. He'd seen the article shared on social media. Couldn't believe it was his mother. Thought she had died years ago. They spoke for 3 hours. Cried. Caught up on decades of lost time. He had married. Had children. Alma had grandchildren she'd never met. Why didn't you find me, she asked. I tried, Mama. I tried for years. But I lost your contact information when I was moving between countries. I asked the Red Cross to help me locate you. They couldn't find any records. I thought you didn't make it out. I am here, Alma said, tears streaming down her face. I am here, and I am so glad to hear your voice. Plans were made for him to visit. To bring his family. To meet his mother after 22 years of separation. Jonathan paid for their flights. Offered to fly Alma to Germany instead, but she refused. Let them come here. Let them see what I have built. Let them understand that even when life takes everything, you can still create something meaningful. They came 3 months later. Alma's son, Kofi, now 43 years old. His German wife, Anna. Their 3 children, ages 12, 9, and 6. Alma's grandchildren, who she was meeting for the first time. The reunion happened at the Brooklyn Center. Surrounded by the life Alma had built from nothing. Kofi walked through the doors and saw his mother standing in the lobby. Older. Grayer. But unmistakably her. They embraced and didn't let go for a long time. The grandchildren watched, uncertain how to react to this grandmother they'd heard about but never met. Alma knelt down to their level. Spoke to them in German, surprising everyone. You learn German? Kofi asked. I learn what I need to learn, Alma said with a smile. I knew someday I might meet my grandchildren. I wanted to speak to them in their language. She gave them a tour. Showed them the birthing rooms. The teaching space. Introduced them to mothers and babies. Explained what she did there. The children were fascinated. The 9-year-old, a girl named Helena, asked, Oma, Daddy said you help babies be born? Yes. That's the best job ever. Alma laughed. Yes. Yes, it is. 7 years after that pivotal night, the Alma Grace Centers held their annual fundraising gala. A fancy event at a Manhattan hotel with wealthy donors and political figures. Alma typically avoided these events. Didn't like the attention. Didn't like getting dressed up. But this year, they'd asked her to speak. Really speak. Tell her story to the room full of people whose donations kept the centers running. She almost said no. I am not good at speeches, she told Eleanor. You're good at truth, Eleanor replied. Just tell them the truth. So Alma agreed. The night of the gala, she wore a dress that Eleanor had helped her pick out. Nothing too fancy. She was still herself, just in nicer clothes. She sat through dinner, uncomfortable with the multiple forks and the formal atmosphere, but she smiled and nodded and made small talk. Then it was time for speeches. Jonathan spoke first. Talked about the center's accomplishments. 7 locations now. Over 2,000 babies delivered. Maternal mortality rate of 0. But statistics don't capture what we've really built here, he said. We've built a place where every woman matters. Where ancient wisdom and modern medicine work together. Where the accident of your birth doesn't determine the safety of your child's birth. And none of this would exist without the woman who started it all. Alma, will you come up here? Alma walked to the podium. Looked out at the room full of wealthy, powerful people. Took a breath. 7 years ago, I was a cleaner. I pushed a cart. I mopped floors. I was invisible. Tonight, I stand before you in a fancy dress at a fancy event, and you see me. You know my name. You want to hear what I have to say. This is strange for me. Laughter rippled through the room. But I did not become a different person. I am the same woman I was then. The same woman I was 30 years ago in Ghana delivering babies in villages. The same woman I was as a refugee with nothing. What changed was not me. What changed was that someone finally saw me. Someone finally listened. On the night Mr. Harrington's daughter was born, I made a choice. I could stay silent, stay invisible, stay safe. Or I could speak up and risk everything. I spoke up. And Mr. Harrington made a choice too. He could dismiss me, trust only the experts he paid for, follow what made sense to his world. Or he could listen to someone who made no sense, who had no credentials, who was nobody. He listened. This is what I want you to understand: we are surrounded by invisible people. The person who cleans your office. The person who serves your food. The person who drives your taxi. The person who watches your children. They are invisible to you. But they are not invisible to themselves. They have stories. They have knowledge. They have gifts. They have wisdom earned through experience that you will never have. Some of you in this room have more money than entire countries. You have power. You have influence. But do you have wisdom? Do you know what it is to lose everything? Do you know what it is to rebuild from nothing? Do you know what it is to be dismissed, ignored, treated as if you do not matter? The people you don't see, they know these things. They have survived what would destroy you. They have learned lessons you will never find in universities. They have solved problems you don't even know exist. My question to you is, are you listening? When the cleaning person in your building tells you something, do you hear them? When the nanny caring for your children offers advice, do you consider it? When someone without a title or degree speaks, do you automatically dismiss them? Because this is how we lose knowledge. This is how we waste wisdom. This is how societies crumble, not from lack of resources, but from failure to see the resources that are right in front of us. The room was completely silent. The night I delivered baby Grace, I did not do magic. I did not do anything complicated. I did what I had done hundreds of times before. I listened to the mother's body. I positioned her differently. I helped the baby turn. Simple things. Ancient things. But the doctors could not see these simple solutions because they were looking at machines instead of the woman. They were following protocols instead of intuition. They were so convinced of their own expertise that they could not imagine someone else might know better. This is the trap of education, of credentials, of status. They make us believe we know everything. They make us stop learning. They make us deaf to other voices. I am glad for education. I am glad for modern medicine. The equipment in our centers saves lives. The doctors we work with are brilliant. But education without humility is dangerous. Knowledge without wisdom is incomplete. Expertise without the willingness to learn from anyone, anywhere, is limited. What we have built with these centers is not just about maternal health. It is about a different way of seeing the world. A way that values every person. That listens to every voice. That recognizes that the person society values least might be the one who saves your life. She paused, her eyes scanning the room. You are here tonight because you want to support a good cause. You will write checks. You will feel good about yourselves. That is fine. We need your money. But I want you to leave here with something more than the satisfaction of donating. I want you to leave here committed to seeing people. Really seeing them. The person who will clean this ballroom after you leave, learn their name. Ask about their life. Listen to their wisdom. The person who will drive you home, talk to them like a human being, not a service. The people who work for you, work in your buildings, serve you in restaurants, care for your children, they are not invisible. Stop treating them as if they are. When you see someone, when you really see them, you change both of you. You change them because being seen is a gift that reminds people they matter. And you change yourself because you discover wisdom and knowledge and perspective you didn't know existed. This is what Mr. and Mrs. Harrington did for me. They saw me. They listened to me. They valued me. And look what happened. Not just a baby saved. Not just a life preserved. But a movement started. Centers built. Lives changed. Policies reformed. All because one man made the choice to listen to someone he would normally ignore. Imagine if all of you made that choice. Imagine if every person in this room, with all your wealth and power and influence, chose to see the invisible people in your world. Imagine what we could build. What problems we could solve. What wisdom we could unlock. You have the power to change the world. Not just with your money. With your attention. With your respect. With your willingness to listen. That is my challenge to you tonight. Go home. Find the people you don't see. See them. And then, listen to what they have to say. Because the person who will change your life, who will save your life, who will teach you what you most need to know might be wearing a uniform you don't respect, speaking with an accent you don't understand, doing work you take for granted. Don't wait for a crisis to finally pay attention. Do it now. Do it always. See people. All people. Every person. That is how we change the world. Alma stepped back from the podium. For a moment, there was silence. Then the room erupted in applause. Not polite charity event applause. Real applause. Standing ovation. People with tears in their eyes. Eleanor was crying. Jonathan had his arm around her, his own eyes wet. Grace, now 7 years old and sitting with her parents, didn't fully understand everything grandmother Alma had said. But she understood that it was important. That the room full of adults was moved by something powerful. That her grandmother Alma was special in a way that went beyond just being kind or loving. After the speech, people lined up to talk to Alma. To shake her hand. To tell her their own stories of being invisible or of finally seeing someone they'd overlooked. A woman in an expensive gown approached, makeup streaked with tears. I employ 12 people in my home, she said. Nanny, housekeeper, chef, driver, others. And I don't know any of their last names. I don't know where they're from. I don't know anything about them except what they do for me. I'm ashamed. And I'm going to change that. An older man, a hedge fund manager, told Alma, my father was a janitor. Worked nights cleaning office buildings so I could go to college. I made my fortune and I forgot where I came from. Started looking down on people like my father. Your speech reminded me. Reminded me who I really am. A younger woman, a tech entrepreneur, said, I've been developing an app to help immigrants get their credentials recognized. Been working on it for 2 years. Tonight, after hearing you, I'm going to stop just working on it and launch it. If it fails, it fails. But people need it now, not when it's perfect. Story after story. Person after person. Alma listened to each one. Offered encouragement. Reminded them that awareness was just the first step, action was what mattered. By the end of the night, the gala had raised $3 million, double the previous record. But more importantly, it had planted seeds in the minds and hearts of people who had the power to create change far beyond the maternal health centers. The years that followed saw the movement expand in ways no one had anticipated. The tech entrepreneur did launch her app. Credential Bridge, she called it. It connected immigrant professionals with pro bono lawyers, credential evaluation services, and educational institutions willing to recognize foreign training. Within 3 years, it had helped over 15,000 people transition into their trained professions. Doctors who had been driving taxis. Engineers who had been washing dishes. Teachers who had been cleaning offices. Each one a story of wasted talent finally recognized. The hedge fund manager whose father had been a janitor created a scholarship fund. Full-ride scholarships to business school for the children of service workers. Not based on grades alone, but on potential, on character, on the kind of wisdom that comes from growing up in a family where hard work and dignity matter more than status. The woman who employed 12 people in her home didn't just learn their names. She helped 3 of them pursue their dreams. Her housekeeper wanted to be a nurse. The woman paid for her nursing school. Her driver wanted to start a business. She provided seed capital and mentorship. Her nanny wanted to bring her children from her home country. She hired an immigration lawyer and navigated the complex process. These weren't isolated incidents. The speech had been recorded and went viral online. Millions of views. Shared across social media. Discussed in classrooms, boardrooms, and living rooms around the world. The cleaning lady's speech, people called it, though Alma disliked that title. "I am a midwife who cleaned," she would correct. That is not the same as being just a cleaning lady. But the message resonated regardless of the title. People began sharing their own stories of being invisible or of discovering wisdom in unexpected places. A movement emerged, informal and organic, called See Them. No official organization. No headquarters. Just people committed to seeing and valuing everyone they encountered. Restaurants started including kitchen staff in staff meetings, discovering that the people cooking the food often had insights about menu and operations that chefs had overlooked. Companies began creating advisory boards that included frontline workers, not just executives, and found that solutions to complex problems often came from people closest to the actual work. Schools invited custodians, cafeteria workers, and administrative staff to participate in educational planning, learning that the adults who interacted with students outside the classroom often understood student needs in ways teachers didn't. It wasn't always successful. Some efforts were performative, companies and institutions checking a box without real commitment. Some people reverted to old patterns after initial enthusiasm faded. Change is hard. Old hierarchies have deep roots. But enough people genuinely changed their approach that the impact was measurable. Studies showed that companies with more inclusive decision-making structures were more innovative and profitable. Schools with input from all staff levels had better student outcomes. Hospitals that integrated traditional and modern approaches had better patient satisfaction and health outcomes. The Alma Grace Centers continued to expand. 12 locations became 20. Then 30. Each one adapted to its community's specific needs. The one in Miami served primarily Haitian and Central American immigrants. The one in Minnesota focused on Somali and Hmong communities. The one in California worked with Pacific Islander populations. But all of them operated on the same principles: respect for traditional knowledge, integration with modern medicine, care without judgment, accessibility for all. Grace, growing up surrounded by this work, absorbed these values like oxygen. By the time she was 12, she was volunteering at the centers. Helping with administrative work. Playing with babies in the waiting room. Listening to mothers' stories. She was fluent in Spanish and learning Mandarin, determined to be able to communicate with as many people as possible. For her bat mitzvah, Eleanor was Jewish, Jonathan had converted, and they were raising Grace in that tradition. She asked that instead of gifts, people donate to the centers or to Credential Bridge. She raised over $50,000. In her bat mitzvah speech, she talked about the story of her own birth. About how she literally wouldn't be alive if her father hadn't listened to someone he would normally ignore. "I think about that a lot," she told the congregation. "How many times do we miss something important because we're not paying attention to the right person? How many solutions pass us by because we only listen to people who look like us, sound like us, have the same credentials as us? I'm 12, so I don't have a lot of power yet. But I have attention. I have respect. I have the ability to see people. And I'm committing to doing that. Every day. For the rest of my life." Alma, sitting in the front row, wept openly. This child. This beautiful, thoughtful child who carried forward the lesson of that night. Who understood at 12 what many people never learned in a lifetime. After the ceremony, Grace came to sit with Alma. Did I do okay, grandmother? You did more than okay. You spoke truth. You honored what matters. I am proud of you. When I grow up, I want to work at the centers. Maybe become a midwife like you. Alma smiled. You should become whatever calls to you. Midwife. Doctor. Teacher. Businesswoman like your father. Whatever you choose, just remember, your work is not your worth. Your worth comes from how you treat people. From whether you see them. From whether you use your gifts to help others. Do that, and you will have a good life. I'll remember, Grace promised. And she did. Years later, when she was making decisions about college, career, life, she came back to that conversation. To the idea that work is what you do, but character is who you are. That success without compassion is empty. That power without service is meaningless. 10 years after the night that changed everything, the original Brooklyn Alma Grace Center held a special celebration. A decade of service. Over 5,000 babies delivered at that location alone. Hundreds of healthcare workers trained. Countless lives changed. They organized a reunion. Invited mothers who had given birth there over the years to come back with their children. The turnout was overwhelming. The center was packed with mothers and babies who weren't babies anymore. 10-year-olds born in the center's first year. Toddlers born just months ago. Every shade of skin. Every language. Every background. All of them connected by being welcomed into the world at this place. Alma walked through the crowd, greeting mothers she remembered, meeting children she had delivered who were now running and playing and full of life. Each one a miracle. Each one a testament to what happens when we choose to see people, to value all knowledge, to work together across differences. One mother, a woman named Maria from Guatemala, approached with her daughter. Miss Alma, do you remember us? Alma looked at the girl, now 9 years old. Looked at the mother. And yes, she remembered. You came in the middle of the night. Your baby was breech. We turned her together, you and I. You were so brave. Maria's eyes filled with tears. You saved us. The hospital had told me I would need surgery. I was terrified. I had no money, no insurance. I almost had her at home alone. Then someone told me about this place. You stayed with me for 14 hours. You never left. You treated me like I mattered. You do matter, Alma said simply. Every mother matters. Every baby matters. Because of you, I believe that. And I taught my daughter. Rosa, tell Miss Alma what you want to be. The girl looked up at Alma with serious eyes. I want to be a midwife. Like you. So I can help moms like you helped my mom. Alma knelt down to the girl's level. Then you will be an excellent midwife. Because you already understand the most important thing, everyone deserves to be treated with dignity. Everyone deserves to be seen. Remember that, and you will help many people. Story after story. Mother after mother. Children born at the center, now thriving, now carrying forward the values of the place that welcomed them into the world. The celebration included speeches. Eleanor spoke about the foundation's work. Dr. Kaufman, now semi-retired but still involved with the centers, spoke about what he had learned. Several mothers shared their experiences. Then Jonathan took the microphone. 10 years ago, I thought I understood the world. I thought money bought everything that mattered. I thought expertise came only from credentials and institutions. I thought the people who served me were less important than the people who sat in boardrooms with me. I was wrong about all of it. He looked directly at Alma, who was sitting in the front row with Grace beside her. One night, one crisis, one woman who refused to stay silent taught me more than my entire expensive education. She taught me that wisdom comes from experience. That value comes from character. That the people we ignore often hold the answers we desperately need. And that lesson didn't just save my daughter's life. It saved my soul. His voice cracked with emotion. I was becoming someone I didn't like. Someone who measured everything in dollars and power. Someone who saw people as assets or obstacles. Someone who was successful by every measure except the ones that actually matter. Alma gave me a chance to be better. To build something that matters. To use my resources for more than just accumulating more resources. These centers, this foundation, this movement, it's not charity. It's not me being generous. It's me paying back a debt I could never fully repay. Because Alma didn't just deliver my daughter. She delivered me from a life that would have been ultimately empty despite all its apparent success. He paused, composing himself. If you take anything from today, take this: look around you. Really look. See the people who make your life possible. The people who clean, who serve, who work in the background. See them. Learn their names. Hear their stories. Value their wisdom. Because one of them might be the person who saves your life. And even if they're not, they're still human beings who deserve to be seen. That shouldn't be a radical idea. But somehow it is. So let's make it normal. Let's make it the default. Let's create a world where everyone is seen, everyone is valued, everyone matters. That's the world Alma has been building, one birth at a time. Let's help her finish the job. The crowd erupted in applause. Alma smiled, shaking her head slightly at all the attention. She didn't do this work for recognition. But if recognition helped spread the message, helped more people understand, then she would accept it. After the speeches, after the cake and the celebration, as the crowd began to thin, Alma found a quiet moment in one of the birthing rooms. Grace found her there. "Grandmother, are you okay? You look sad." "Not sad, child. Reflective. I am thinking about all the years between that night and this one. About how much has changed. About how much stays the same. What stays the same? People still need to be seen. Still need to be heard. Still need to matter. That never changes. The work is never done. We can build 1,000 centers, train 1 million healthcare workers, change 1 billion minds, and there will still be invisible people who need someone to see them. That is the nature of being human. We forget. We get comfortable. We fall back into old patterns. So the work must continue. Always. Grace sat down next to her. "Then I'll help you continue it. Me and all the babies born here. We'll remember. We'll keep seeing people. We'll keep the work going." Alma put her arm around the girl. "Yes. That is how it works. One generation teaches the next. The lessons get passed down. Not perfectly. Not without setbacks. But they get passed down. And slowly, slowly, the world becomes a little bit better." They sat together in comfortable silence, surrounded by the walls that had witnessed thousands of births, thousands of first breaths, thousands of moments when new life entered the world and was welcomed with respect and care and love. Not everyone celebrated the Alma Grace Centers and the movement they represented. There was resistance, sometimes subtle, sometimes explicit. Some medical organizations criticized the integration of traditional practices. "We're supposed to be moving forward, not backward," one professional association wrote in a statement. Evidence-based medicine should not be diluted with folk practices that haven't been rigorously studied. Alma addressed these criticisms directly in an interview with a medical journal. Evidence-based medicine is important. I am not arguing against it. But we must ask, what counts as evidence? For hundreds of years, women have been delivering babies using techniques passed down through generations. Techniques that work. That save lives. But because they were not studied in universities, not published in journals, they are dismissed as folk practices. This is arrogance. We should study these techniques, yes. Understand why they work. Integrate them with modern knowledge. But we should not dismiss them simply because they come from the wrong sources. That is how we lose valuable knowledge. The interviewer pushed back, but surely you agree that modern medical training is superior to traditional methods? Superior for what? Alma responded. Modern medicine excels at crisis intervention. At surgery. At treating disease. At using technology to diagnose and treat complex conditions. Traditional medicine excels at prevention. At working with the body's natural processes. At low-intervention approaches. At holistic care. Why must one be superior? Why can they not work together, each contributing what it does best? The debate continued in medical journals, at conferences, in hospital board rooms. Some institutions embraced the integrated approach. Others resisted. Progress was uneven. Frustratingly slow in some places. But it was progress nonetheless. There was also political resistance. When the foundation began advocating for policy changes, credential recognition for immigrant healthcare workers, expanded scope of practice for midwives, they encountered opposition from professional organizations worried about protecting their turf and their status. This is about safety, the opposition argued. About maintaining standards. We can't just let anyone practice medicine because they claim to have experience. No one is suggesting anyone, Eleanor countered in testimony before a state legislature. We're suggesting that someone like Alma Grace, who delivered over 700 babies successfully before coming to America, who has more practical experience than most obstetricians, should have a pathway to use her skills. Not without oversight. Not without verification. But with recognition that experience matters, that knowledge comes in many forms, that we are wasting talent by imposing rigid requirements that often have more to do with protecting professional status than ensuring quality care. The legislative battles were hard. Some were won. Some were lost. But each fight raised awareness, changed minds, moved the conversation forward. Jonathan used his influence, his political connections, his money to push for change. Not always successfully. But persistently. He learned that changing systems was harder than building businesses. That institutional inertia was more difficult to overcome than market competition. But he kept pushing. Eleanor focused on changing hearts. She told stories. Brought mothers to speak to legislators, to medical boards, to journalists. Put human faces on policy debates. Made abstract arguments concrete. This is Maria, she would say, introducing a mother at a press conference. She nearly died in childbirth because the hospital she could afford didn't have staff who spoke her language, didn't understand her cultural needs, treated her like a problem to be managed rather than a person to be cared for. The Alma Grace Center gave her dignified care. Her daughter is healthy. She is healthy. That's what we're fighting for. Not abstract policies. Real people. Real lives. The media coverage was mixed. Some outlets celebrated the work. Others were skeptical, framing it as wealthy people playing at social justice while ignoring systemic issues. The Harringtons have built some nice clinics, one columnist wrote. But they're still billionaires. They're still part of a system that creates the inequalities they claim to be addressing. It's performative at best, hypocritical at worst. Jonathan read these criticisms and they stung. Partly because they weren't entirely wrong. Am I a hypocrite? He asked Eleanor one night. I made my fortune through aggressive capitalism. I didn't worry about inequality when I was building my companies. Now I'm trying to fix problems I probably contributed to. Is this just salving my conscience? Eleanor considered the question. Maybe partly. But so what? Even if your motives aren't purely altruistic, even if you're trying to feel better about your past, the work still matters. The centers still help people. The policies we're pushing for still make a difference. Purity of motive is less important than effectiveness of action. But I can't undo the harm I did. Can't give back all the money I made by underpaying workers, by crushing competitors, by maximizing profit above all else. No, you can't undo it. But you can do better going forward. You can use your power differently. You can teach Grace to use her inherited privilege responsibly. That's not nothing. Jonathan thought about his daughter. Thought about the kind of world he was leaving her. Thought about whether his late-life philanthropy was enough to balance his earlier ruthlessness. He didn't know. But he knew he had to try. Alma, when asked about these criticisms, was philosophical. People who do nothing criticize people who do something. This is always the way. Mr. Harrington is not perfect. These centers are not perfect. This movement is not perfect. But perfect is the enemy of good. We do what we can, with what we have, where we are. We help who we can help. We change what we can change. And we trust that it matters, even when people say it doesn't. She paused, then added, also, I notice that the people who criticize are usually not the mothers giving birth at our centers. Not the babies being born safely. Not the families receiving care they couldn't get anywhere else. The criticism comes from people who already have access, already have power. Their opinion matters less to me than the opinion of the mother holding her healthy baby, knowing she was treated with dignity. That mother, she knows if this work matters. Alma was 74 when her health began to decline. She had never been sick, had always been strong despite her age and her hard life. But time catches everyone eventually. She started feeling tired. Short of breath. Went to the doctor reluctantly, only after Eleanor insisted. The diagnosis was heart failure. Years of stress, of hard work, of surviving what would have killed weaker people, had taken their toll. Her heart was wearing out. How long, she asked the cardiologist directly. With treatment, could be years. Without it, months. But the quality of life will decline either way. I'm sorry. Alma nodded calmly. She had seen death many times. Had delivered babies knowing their mothers might not survive. Had lost her husband, possibly her sons, everyone she'd known from her old life. Death was not a stranger. I will take the treatment, she decided. Not for years. Just for enough time to finish what I started. What you started? The doctor asked. Teaching. There is still knowledge I have not passed on. Still students who need to learn. I need time. She got 18 months. 18 months of medication and doctor's appointments and gradual decline. But also 18 months of intensive teaching. She worked with a documentary crew to record everything she knew. Every technique. Every piece of wisdom. Every story. Hours and hours of footage that would be edited into training materials for midwives, doulas, and obstetricians. She wrote, with Eleanor's help, a book. The Wisdom of Birth, integrating traditional and modern approaches to maternal care. It included detailed descriptions of positioning techniques, breathing patterns, manual rotation methods, all the practical knowledge she'd accumulated over 5 decades. But it also included philosophy. Reflections on the meaning of care, on the importance of dignity, on seeing every mother as a whole person rather than a medical case. The book was published 6 months before she died. Became required reading in several midwifery programs. Generated controversy and conversation. Exactly what Alma wanted. She spent time with Grace, now 17 and preparing for college. You will do great things, Alma told her. I know this. How do you know? Because you understand what matters. Many people never learn this. They chase success, money, fame, things that ultimately mean nothing. You already know that people matter. Connection matters. Service matters. With that foundation, you cannot fail, even if the world says you did. I'm going to miss you, grandmother. I will miss you too. But I will also be with you. In the lessons I taught you. In the values you carry. In the way you see people. That is how we live on, not through our bodies, but through what we pass to those who come after us. She said goodbye to the mothers she had helped over the years. To the staff at the centers. To the students she had trained. To everyone whose life she had touched. She refused a big funeral. When I die, gather at the Brooklyn Center. Bring babies. Bring joy. Celebrate life, not death. That is what a midwife would want. Alma Grace Mensah died on a Tuesday morning in March, surrounded by Eleanor, Jonathan, and Grace. Her last words were in her native language, something none of them understood. But they sounded like a prayer. Like a blessing. Like a woman who had lived fully and was ready to rest. The gathering at the Brooklyn Center was exactly as she wanted. No funeral home. No casket. Just people sharing stories, holding babies, celebrating a life lived in service to others. Over 300 people came. Mothers she had helped. Doctors she had taught. Students she had trained. Politicians she had influenced. Wealthy donors and poor immigrant families, all together in the space she had built, mourning the same loss. Grace spoke, her voice steady despite her tears. Grandmother Alma used to say that the work is never done. That there will always be invisible people who need to be seen. She was right. And now she's gone, and we have to continue the work without her physical presence. But her spirit, her lessons, her wisdom, they're still here. In these walls. In the techniques we use. In the way we treat every mother with dignity. In the understanding that value doesn't come from credentials or status, but from character and care. She looked around the room. Grandmother Alma's life was hard. She lost everything multiple times. She could have become bitter. Could have given up. Could have decided the world was cruel and stopped caring. But she didn't. She chose to use her gifts anyway. She chose to help people anyway. She chose to believe that her life could matter, even when the world told her it didn't. That's the lesson. That's what she's leaving us. Not a perfect model. Not a complete solution to all the world's problems. Just an example of one person who refused to become invisible, who insisted on using her gifts, who committed to seeing and being seen. If we all did that, if every person in this room committed to living that way, imagine what we could accomplish. The room was silent except for the occasional baby cry, which felt appropriate. Life continuing. New generations being born. The work going on. Jonathan stood and added his own words. I was a successful businessman before I met Alma. But I wasn't a good man. Not really. I was selfish. Arrogant. Blind to anyone who didn't serve my purposes. One night, one crisis, one woman who refused to stay silent changed everything. She saved my daughter. But more than that, she saved me from a life that would have been ultimately meaningless despite all its apparent success. He looked at Eleanor, at Grace, at the crowd. The best investment I ever made wasn't in tech or real estate or any of the deals that made me rich. It was listening to a cleaning lady when every instinct told me not to. It was building these centers. It was learning to see people. Everything else I've done will be forgotten eventually. But the lives saved here, the families helped here, the change in thinking that started here, that might actually matter. That might actually last. And that's all because Alma Grace refused to be invisible. The stories continued for hours. Each person sharing how Alma had impacted their life. Maria, the mother from Guatemala, spoke through tears about how Alma had treated her with dignity when everyone else made her feel worthless. Dr. Kaufman talked about how Alma had humbled him and made him a better doctor. A young midwife described how Alma's training had given her confidence to trust traditional methods alongside modern ones. A hospital administrator explained how Alma had convinced her institution to change its policies. On and on. Each story a thread in the tapestry of a life well lived. A life that mattered. A life that would continue to ripple outward long after its end. In the years after Alma's death, the movement she started continued to grow. Grace, true to her promise, became a midwife. Went to nursing school, then specialized training, then worked at the Brooklyn Alma Grace Center. By 25, she was delivering babies herself, using techniques Alma had taught her, treating every mother with the dignity Alma had modeled. She was different from Alma in many ways. Grew up with privilege Alma never had. Had access to education and opportunities Alma had been denied. But she carried forward the essential lesson: see people. All people. Every person. One day, a young woman came to the center. Pregnant. Alone. Terrified. She spoke minimal English. Came from a country Grace had never heard of. Had no insurance, no money, no support system. The kind of patient that many facilities would turn away or treat as a problem. Grace sat with her. Found a translator. Learned her story. The woman's name was Amara. She had fled war, just like Alma had. Had lost her family. Had been assaulted during her escape, which is how she became pregnant. Was living in a shelter, working under the table for cash, invisible to official systems. You are safe here, Grace told her through the translator. We will take care of you. You and your baby both matter. Over the coming months, Grace helped Amara navigate the pregnancy. But also helped her navigate life in America. Connected her with immigration lawyers, with social services, with community organizations. Treated her not as a case but as a person. When Amara went into labor, Grace was there. Stayed with her for 16 hours. Used Alma's techniques when the labor stalled. Talked her through the fear and pain and trauma that surfaced during birth. Delivered a healthy baby boy. Watched Amara hold her son and cry with a complicated mix of joy and grief. Thank you, Amara whispered. For seeing me. For treating me like I am human. Grace smiled through her own tears. You are human. You matter. Your son matters. Don't ever forget that. After Amara left the hospital with her baby, Grace sat in Alma's old office, surrounded by the photographs and mementos that still decorated the space. I get it now, grandmother, she said to the empty room. I understand what you meant about the work never being done. There will always be another Amara. Always another invisible person who needs to be seen. And we just keep doing it. One person at a time. One birth at a time. That's the work. The Alma Grace Centers expanded internationally. Facilities opened in Ghana, in other African countries, in Central America, in Southeast Asia. Each one adapted to local contexts but built on the same principles. Local traditional birth attendants working alongside modern medical professionals. Respect for cultural practices integrated with evidence-based care. Dignity for every mother regardless of her circumstances. The outcomes were remarkable. Communities with Alma Grace Centers saw maternal and infant mortality rates drop significantly. Saw increased prenatal care. Saw women choosing facility births over risky home births because they trusted they would be treated well. Saw traditional knowledge being preserved and passed on rather than lost. The model was studied by international health organizations. The World Health Organization published reports on the effectiveness of integrating traditional and modern maternal care. Other organizations began recommending similar approaches. What started in one Brooklyn hospital room was changing global health policy. Jonathan continued funding it all, but he also began training Grace to eventually take over the foundation. Teaching her about managing money, about philanthropy, about using wealth responsibly. Money is a tool, he told her. Nothing more. The question is what you build with it. You can build monuments to yourself. Or you can build things that actually help people. One lasts longer in history. The other lasts longer in impact. Grace listened, learned, and started developing her own vision for how to expand the work. She wanted to create a global network. Connect traditional birth attendants from different cultures so they could learn from each other. Document indigenous knowledge before it was lost. Create scholarships for people like Amma, talented healthcare workers whose credentials weren't recognized, so they could get the training they needed to practice in formal systems. By 30, she was running the foundation alongside her parents. By 35, she had expanded it beyond maternal health into other areas where traditional and modern knowledge needed to integrate. Elder care. Mental health. Chronic disease management. Each area had its own ammas, people with practical wisdom that complemented professional expertise. The Foundation's mission evolved, seeing the invisible. Valuing all knowledge. Bridging traditional wisdom and modern practice. Creating systems that honor every person's dignity. It was ambitious. It was ongoing. It was never finished. Just as Amma had said. 15 years after Amma's death, something unexpected happened. Grace, now 32 and pregnant with her own first child, was working at the Brooklyn Center when a visitor arrived. An older man, maybe in his 60s, with an accent she couldn't place. He asked to speak to someone about Amma Grace Mensah. "I knew her," he said. "Long ago. In Ghana. I heard she worked here before she died. I hoped maybe someone could tell me about her final years." Grace's heart began to race. "What was your name?" "Kofi. Kofi Mensah. She was my mother." Grace stared at him. The son. One of the sons Amma had lost contact with. The one who had visited once but then drifted away again. "I'm Grace Harrington. Your mother, she saved my life when I was born. She delivered me. And then she became like a grandmother to me. She loved you. Talked about you. Hope to see you again." Kofi's face crumpled. "I should have come back sooner. I meant to. But life got complicated. I convinced myself she was fine, that I would visit next year. And then I heard she had died and I couldn't face it. Couldn't face that I had let so much time pass." Grace took his hand. "Come with me. I want to show you something." She led him through the center. Showed him the birthing rooms, the teaching space, the photographs of Amma on the walls. Explained what his mother had built, what she had created, how many lives she had touched. Kofi wept openly as he walked through the space. "I didn't know. I didn't know she had done all this. I thought, when I last saw her, she was still cleaning. I sent money when I could, but I didn't know. She didn't do it for recognition," Grace said gently. "She did it because it was who she was. Because she couldn't not help people, even when the world treated her as invisible. Your mother was extraordinary. And she forgave you for the distance. She understood. She knew you had to build your own life. Did she? Was she happy? At the end?" Grace thought about this carefully. She was satisfied. She had purpose. She had people who loved her. She had work that mattered. I don't know if she was happy in some simple, uncomplicated way. She carried too much grief for that. But she was at peace. She knew her life had meaning. That's more than happiness." Kofi nodded, unable to speak. Grace showed him Amma's office, preserved mostly as she had left it. Her books. Her notes. Her photographs, including one of Kofi and his brother as children. He picked up the photo, touched the faces, set it down gently. "I came to tell you something," he said finally. "My brother. The one who went to France. I found him. After years of searching. He's alive. Living in Paris. He has a family. We've reconnected. And when I told him about our mother, about what she built here, he wanted to help. To contribute. To do something that would honor her memory." "That's not necessary," Grace began. "Maybe not necessary. But needed. For us. We need to feel like we're part of this, like we're honoring what she did. We weren't there for her when she was alive. Let us be here for her legacy now. Grace understood. Sometimes people need to make amends, even when the person they wronged is gone. Even when forgiveness has already been given. Then yes. We'd welcome your help. We're planning to expand the center. Add more training programs. Your support would make a difference. They talked for hours. Kofi told stories about Alma when he was young. About her skill, her dedication, her love for her family. Grace told stories about Alma's later years. About her teaching, her wisdom, her impact. They traded memories, building a fuller picture of this woman they both loved. Before Kofi left, Grace said, "I'm pregnant. My first baby. I'm going to deliver here, in this center, in one of the rooms your mother helped design. I wish she could be here for it." "She will be," Kofi said. "In the techniques they'll use. In the values of care. In the spirit of this place. She'll be there." He was right. 4 months later, when Grace went into labor, she felt Alma's presence in every moment. In the way the midwife touched her belly with practiced hands. In the breathing guidance that came from ancient knowledge. In the respect and dignity with which she was treated. In the healthy baby girl who entered the world surrounded by love and care. Grace named her daughter Alma. Alma Harrington. A name that carried weight, carried history, carried responsibility. When people asked why, Grace told them the story. About a woman who refused to be invisible. About a cleaning lady who knew more than 15 doctors. About wisdom that comes from experience rather than credentials. About seeing people. All people. Every person. Little Alma grew up in the centers, just as Grace had. Played in the birthing rooms. Listened to mother's stories. Absorbed the values that her great-grandmother, not by blood but by love, had embodied. And the cycle continued. 20 years after that pivotal night in the delivery room, the ripple effects had spread far beyond anyone could have anticipated. The story had been documented in multiple books, a feature film, countless articles. It was taught in medical schools as a case study in humility and integrated care. It was discussed in business schools as an example of transformative leadership. It was analyzed in sociology classes as a study of invisible labor and marginalized knowledge. But the real impact wasn't in the academic discussions or the media coverage. It was in the thousands of small moments happening every day around the world. A doctor in Seattle pausing to listen to a traditional healer's advice about a difficult case. A CEO in Chicago learning the names of everyone who cleaned his office building and discovering that one of them had a PhD in engineering from a university the US didn't recognize. A nurse in Atlanta spending extra time with an immigrant mother, finding a translator, ensuring she understood her care options. A billionaire in Singapore funding a clinic for migrant workers after hearing the story of Alma Grace. A young medical student in London choosing to specialize in integrating traditional practices after reading Alma's book. A policy maker in Washington pushing for immigration reform that would recognize foreign credentials more readily. Each one a small change. Each one a person choosing to see rather than overlook. Each one a tiny shift in how systems operated, how people interacted, how value was determined. None of them as dramatic as that night in the delivery room. But collectively, they mattered. They added up. They changed the world in incremental but meaningful ways. The maternal mortality rate in the United States, which had been rising for decades, began to decline. Not dramatically. Not everywhere. But enough to be measurable. Studies attributed the improvement to multiple factors, but integrated care models like the Alma Grace Centers were cited as significant contributors. Communities with access to culturally competent, dignity-centered maternal care saw better outcomes. Women who felt heard, respected, and cared for had safer births. Babies whose mothers received comprehensive support were healthier. It seemed obvious in retrospect. Treat people well and they do better. But it had taken a crisis, a miracle, and decades of advocacy to make that obvious truth into standard practice. The professional landscape changed too. Midwifery became more respected within medical systems. Not everywhere. Not without continued resistance. But the trend was clear. Hospitals that integrated midwives into their care teams saw better patient satisfaction, lower C-section rates, and comparable safety outcomes. More medical schools added training on traditional practices. More hospitals hired cultural liaisons and traditional birth attendants. More insurance companies began covering midwifery care and birth center services. The Alma Grace Centers became a model replicated around the world. There were over 100 facilities now, across 6 continents. Each one unique to its community but united by core principles. The organization had grown beyond what Jonathan could personally oversee. It had a board, a CEO, regional directors, thousands of staff members. But at its heart, it remained true to Alma's vision: see people, value all knowledge, provide dignified care. Grace served on the board while also working clinically. She insisted on continuing to deliver babies despite her growing administrative responsibilities. "I need to stay connected to the actual work," she told her father. "It's easy to get lost in strategy and policy and forget what we're actually trying to do. Every birth reminds me." Jonathan understood. He too maintained habits that kept him grounded. Still visited the centers regularly. Still talked to mothers and staff. Still remembered what it felt like to stand helpless in a corner watching his wife and daughter die until someone he would have normally ignored saved them both. He was 73 now. Eleanor was 70. They were beginning to think about succession, about legacy, about what would happen to the work when they were gone. Grace was prepared to take over. But they also wanted to ensure the organization would outlast any individual. That it would continue even when everyone who remembered that night was gone. "How do you institutionalize a value?" Eleanor asked during one planning meeting. "How do you ensure that 'see people' doesn't become just a slogan? That it remains a living practice?" Grace thought about this. "You tell the story. You tell it over and over. You make sure every new staff member hears about Grandmother Alma. You make sure every new board member understands where this came from. You embed it in training, in evaluation, in promotion. You measure it. You reward it. You model it from the top. And you trust," Jonathan added. "Trust that if we build something meaningful, if we really live these values, others will catch the vision and carry it forward. That's all we can do." They created an oral history project. Interviewed everyone who had been there that night or had known Alma personally. Recorded their memories before age and time erased them. Created a permanent archive that future generations could access. The recordings were powerful. Dr. Kaufman, now in his 80s, still emotional talking about the night he was humbled. Nurses who had witnessed the delivery describing the tension, the miracle, the transformation. Mothers who had been cared for by Alma sharing their gratitude. Jonathan and Eleanor telling the story from their perspective. Grace adding her own memories of growing up with Alma as her grandmother figure. All of it preserved. All of it there for anyone who wanted to understand where this movement came from. Young Alma Harrington was 7 when her mother, Grace, sat her down and told her the full story of her namesake. Not the simplified version she'd heard before, but the complete truth. About the war. About the refugee camp. About cleaning floors. About the night in the delivery room. About everything. "Your great-grandmother Alma was the strongest person I ever knew," Grace said. Not because she was physically strong. But because she refused to let the world define her. She knew who she was, a midwife, a healer, someone who helped bring life into the world. And she held on to that identity even when she was doing work that had nothing to do with it. Even when everyone around her treated her as less than she was. Little Alma listened with wide eyes. Was she sad? That people didn't see her? Sometimes, yes. But more than sad, she was determined. Determined to stay true to herself. Determined to use her gifts when the opportunity came. Determined to build something so that other people like her wouldn't have to be invisible. I want to be like her, Alma said. Then be yourself, Grace replied. That's what she would tell you. Don't try to be her. Be you. But carry forward the lesson, see people. Value people. Use your gifts to help people. That's how you honor her. Alma took the lesson to heart. Even at 7, she was unusually observant. She noticed the custodian at her school and learned his name was Marcus. She talked to him, asked about his life, learned that he was an artist who painted at night after his cleaning shifts. She told her teacher, who organized an art show featuring Marcus's work. She noticed the lunch lady who always seemed sad. Found out that the woman's daughter was sick and she was worried about medical bills. Told her mother, who connected the woman with resources through the foundation. She noticed an older woman who sat alone in the park every day. Started sitting with her. Learned her name was Mrs. Chen and she had outlived her husband and all her friends and was lonely. Brought her to family dinners at the Harrington home, giving her companionship and purpose. Small acts. Child-sized acts. But they showed that she understood. That she saw. That she was carrying forward a legacy that went beyond wealth or institutions. By the time Alma was 12, she was volunteering at the Brooklyn Center. Not just playing in the corner as Grace once had, but actively helping. Reading to mothers in the waiting room. Helping with administrative tasks. Learning about birth and care and the work her great-grandmother had done. Do you think you'll become a midwife too? One of the staff asked her. Alma shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe a doctor. Or maybe something else entirely. But whatever I do, I want to help people. I want to see them. That's what great-grandmother Alma would want. She was right. That was exactly what Alma would have wanted. Not for her descendants to replicate her exact path, but to carry forward the underlying principle, everyone matters, everyone deserves to be seen, everyone has value. Grace watched her daughter and felt a profound sense of continuity. The lesson was being passed down. Not perfectly. Not without the normal struggles of childhood and adolescence. But it was being passed down. And it would continue to be passed down to Alma's children and their children and so on. That's how change happens. Not in one dramatic moment, though those moments are important. But in the steady, persistent passing of values from one generation to the next. In parents teaching children. In grandparents telling stories. In communities holding on to what matters even as everything else changes. Jonathan, now in his 80s, watched his granddaughter with satisfaction. She's going to be something special, he told Eleanor. She already is, Eleanor replied. Just like her great-grandmother was. Just like Grace is. Just like all people are when someone takes the time to see them. They were sitting in the Brooklyn Center, attending a celebration of its 25th anniversary. The place was packed with people whose lives had been touched by Alma's legacy. Hundreds of families. Thousands of stories. All connected by one principle, everyone deserves dignity. The current director of the center, a woman named Sarah who had been one of Alma's students, stood to speak. I never met Alma Grace before she started this center, she said. I came here as a pregnant teenager. Scared. Alone. Convinced I was going to be judged and dismissed. Instead, I found care and respect and support. Alma delivered my daughter. And in the process, she delivered me too. Delivered me from thinking I was worthless. Delivered me from believing my mistakes defined me. Delivered me into a new understanding of my own value. She paused, emotional. After my daughter was born, I asked Alma if I could volunteer here. I wanted to give back. She said yes, but she also said something I never forgot. you don't need to give back. You need to give forward. Take what you received here and pass it on to someone else who needs it. So I did. I became a doula. Then a midwife. Now I run this center. And every single day, I try to treat mothers the way Amma treated me. With dignity. With respect. With the understanding that their lives matter. She looked around the room. Many of you have similar stories. You came here in crisis and found care. You came here invisible and were seen. You came here dismissed and were valued. That's Amma's legacy. That's what we're celebrating today. Not a person, though she was extraordinary. But a principle. A way of being in the world. A commitment to seeing everyone, especially those the world teaches us to overlook. If you've stayed with us through this entire journey, thank you. This story is long because the impact was profound, because the lessons are deep, because the transformation was real. Now I want you to do something. Close your eyes for a moment after this video ends and think about the invisible people in your life. The person who delivers your mail. The person who bags your groceries. The person who cleans the building where you work. The person who serves your coffee. Do you know their names? Do you know their stories? Do you see them? This week, I challenge you to truly see one person you normally overlook. Learn their name. Ask about their life. Listen to their answer. Treat them with the dignity that Amma Grace showed to every person she encountered. And then tell us about it in the comments. Share your story. Tell us who you saw and what you learned. Let's create a community of people committed to seeing each other. Because that's how we change the world. Not through grand gestures or massive donations, though those help. But through small acts of recognition, repeated every day, by millions of people who refuse to treat anyone as invisible. If this story moved you, share it. Not for us, but for the message. Because somewhere right now, there's another Amma Grace. Brilliant. Experienced. Wise. But invisible because of circumstances or credentials or the color of their skin or their accent or their position in society's hierarchy. And that person might have the answer to a problem you're facing. Might have the wisdom you're seeking. Might be able to save a life that seems unsavable. But only if you see them. Only if you listen. Only if you give them the chance to be who they truly are. Subscribe to this channel for more stories that challenge how you see the world. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a video. And drop a comment right now telling us, who in your life deserves to be seen? Who have you been overlooking? Who will you commit to noticing this week? Let's honor Amma Grace's memory by living her lesson. Let's create a world where no one has to be invisible. Where everyone's gifts are recognized. Where wisdom is valued regardless of where it comes from. That world is possible. But it starts with you. It starts with seeing. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And thank you for being willing to change. Now go. See someone. And watch what happens. 30 years after that night in the delivery room, Grace stood in the rebuilt and expanded Brooklyn Center, now 5 times its original size. She was 52 years old. Her daughter Amma was 22 and in medical school, already planning to specialize in maternal fetal medicine. Her father Jonathan had passed away 2 years earlier, at 83, still involved with the foundation until his final weeks. Her mother Eleanor continued the work, now 85 but still sharp, still passionate, still committed. The center was celebrating its 30th anniversary. Over 70,000 babies have been born across all the Amma Grace centers globally. The maternal mortality rate in communities served by the centers was a fraction of national averages. The model had been adopted by governments, integrated into public health systems, studied and replicated worldwide. But more than the numbers, more than the institutional success, was the cultural shift. The understanding that marginalized voices matter. That traditional knowledge has value. That the person cleaning the floor might know something the person in the corner office doesn't. That seeing people, really seeing them, changes both the seer and the seen. Grace walked through the anniversary celebration, greeting old friends and colleagues. She saw mothers who had given birth here decades ago, now bringing their daughters who were pregnant. She saw staff members who had been trained by Amma personally, now training the next generation. She saw the photographs on the walls, Amma in her cleaning uniform, Amma delivering a baby, Amma teaching a class, Amma holding newborn Grace all those years ago. She stopped in front of that last photograph. Studied Amma's face, the gentle smile, the wise eyes, the hands that had brought so many lives into the world. "I did it, grandmother," Grace whispered. "I kept the work going. I saw people. I taught my daughter to see people. And she'll teach her children. Your lesson continues." She felt, as she always did in these moments, that Amma was somehow present. Not literally. Grace didn't believe in ghosts. But present in the values that permeated this place, in the care that was given here, in the lives that were touched and changed and saved. That night in the delivery room had been a crisis that revealed a truth: we need each other. All of us. The billionaire needs the cleaner. The doctor needs the traditional healer. The powerful need the marginalized. We need each other's knowledge, each other's wisdom, each other's gifts. And when we recognize that, when we truly see each other, miracles become possible. Babies are born who shouldn't have survived. Systems change that seemed immovable. People flourish who were told they didn't matter. Grace returned to the celebration. Made a speech thanking everyone who had carried Amma's vision forward. Cut the anniversary cake alongside her mother. Held a newborn who had been born at the center that very morning, continuing the cycle of life that Amma had dedicated herself to honoring. As the event wound down and people began to leave, a young woman approached Grace. She wore a medical student's white coat. She looked nervous. "Mrs. Harrington. I'm sorry to bother you. My name is Fatima. I just wanted to thank you." "Thank me for what?" "For this place. For what it represents. I was born here. 27 years ago. My mother was a refugee from Somalia. She had no money, no support, no one. But she came here and she was treated with dignity. Your grandmother Amma delivered me. She saved my mother's life. The labor was complicated, just like with your birth. And Amma knew what to do." Grace's eyes widened. "You were one of Amma's babies?" "Yes. And because I was born safely, because my mother survived, I had a chance at life. She worked hard, put me through school. Now I'm in medical school. I'm going to be an obstetrician. Because of what happened here. Because of Amma Grace." She paused, emotional. "I wanted you to know that her impact didn't stop with you. It didn't stop with the centers. It continues in every person who was born here, every family that was helped here. I'm going to spend my career making sure women like my mother, women who are dismissed and overlooked, receive the care they deserve. That's my purpose. That's my way of honoring what was given to me." Grace embraced her. Two women, two generations, connected by a legacy that transcended any individual life. "Amma would be so proud," Grace said. "So proud that you're carrying forward the work. That you understand what matters." "I won't forget," Fatima promised. "I'll teach my own children. And they'll teach theirs." The lesson continues. After Fatima left, Grace stood alone in the quiet center. The celebration was over. The staff had gone home. It was just her and the ghosts of the past and the promise of the future. She thought about that night 30 years ago. About her mother screaming on a delivery bed. About her father's helpless panic. About 15 experts who couldn't help. About a cleaning lady who quietly walked in and changed everything. She thought about all the nights since then. All the births. All the mothers helped. All the lives saved. All the people who had learned to see rather than overlook. She thought about her daughter Amma, carrying the name and the legacy forward. About young Fatima, turning her own rescue into a commitment to rescue others. About the countless other people whose lives had been touched by one woman's refusal to stay silent. The work was never done. There would always be more invisible people who needed to be seen. More marginalized voices that needed to be heard. More wisdom that needed to be recognized. But the work continued. That was the point. That was the legacy. Not perfection. Not completion. But continuation. One person at a time. One birth at a time. One moment of recognition at a time. Building a world where everyone mattered. Where everyone was seen. Where everyone's gifts were valued. That's what Amma Grace had started on a desperate night in a delivery room. And that's what would continue long after everyone who remembered her was gone. Because some lessons, once learned, once embodied, once passed from generation to generation, become immortal. Not in stone monuments or history books. But in the living practice of people who choose, every day, to see each other as human beings deserving of dignity and respect. Grace locked up the center and walked out into the New York night. The city buzzed with millions of lives, most of them invisible to each other. People rushing past without seeing. But somewhere in that crowd was the next Amma Grace. Someone with gifts the world didn't recognize. Someone with wisdom the world overlooked. Someone who, if given the chance, if truly seen, could change everything. That person was out there. Waiting. Hoping. Surviving. And Grace's work, Amma's legacy, was to make sure that when that person's moment came, someone would be ready to listen. Someone would be ready to see. Someone would be ready to believe that the most unlikely person might hold the answer to an impossible problem. That was the lesson. That was the legacy. That was the story of Amma Grace. A woman who cleaned floors and delivered babies and changed the world by simply refusing to be invisible. And 30 years later, her impact continued to ripple outward, touching lives she never knew, in ways she never imagined, creating a future she never got to see but absolutely made possible. That's what happens when we see people. Really see them. The world changes. One person at a time. One moment at a time. One act of recognition at a time. Until the impossible becomes possible. Until the invisible become visible. Until everyone, finally, is seen.